Good morning. This is Dr. David A. Padgett. Today is March 17th. This is World Regional Geography 1010, Section 98A, Spring Semester 2021. So I'm going to share my screen now and we'll get right into today's activities. Basically, today I'm going to do two things. I'm going to go over the Unit A, the Unit A exam, just for your own edification, in case you're wondering which questions you missed or got correct, and possibly why, or if you had any questions. And then I'm going to look at a few of the Research Quiz 1 submissions, just so that we'll get an idea of what I expected or what I expect on the next quiz, which will be next week. And then I'm going to finish up the lecture on the human geography of North America. We'll focus upon urban geography. So without any further delay, I'm going to pull up the Unit A exam and just go through it. Okay, so the first part of the exam was pretty straightforward. Which one of the words below means Earth description? That is, of course, B, geography, geo, Earth, graph to describe. Number 2, which one of the words below is a study of population? That would be D, demography, and that is spelled out in chapter 2 of the textbook. Which one of the words below is the art and science of map making? That is E, cartography. Number 4, which one of the following is the study of the physical processes that shape the Earth's surface? That's C, geomorphology, geo-earth, morph, shape, geomorphology. Number 5, which one of the following means to measure the Earth? That is A, geometry, geo-earth, meter, to measure. Number 6, meteorology is most closely associated with the C, earth science tradition of geography. There are 4 traditions of geography that you learned as we went through the timeline: the spatial tradition, the earth science tradition, the area studies tradition, and the human land tradition. So those are the 4 traditions of geography. As you can see, the only answer amongst the 5 choices that is actually amongst the 4 traditions of geography is earth science. So even if you didn't know what meteorology is or was, I'm sure most of you all do. If you knew the 4 traditions of geography, you should have easily been successful in answering this question 6. Question 7 is most closely associated with the A, human land tradition of geography, and that should be pretty obvious. Here's an easy one. GIS stands for D, Geographic Information Systems. Number 9, all lines of longitude are great circles. What is a great circle? A great circle is a circle that splits the Earth in half and goes through the North and South Pole. All lines of longitude do that. They're all great circles. Question 10, globalization. Globalization was covered in detail in chapter 13 of the textbook. Again, that is most closely associated with C, the area studies tradition of geography. Number 11, the absolute location of all the light poles on campus on a the absolute location of all the light poles on a large scale map of TSU's campus would most likely be represented by, and that would be C, point symbols. Remember, absolute locations are comprised of latitude and longitude, which are specific points on the Earth's surface. And so they would be best symbolized, of course, by point symbols. Then, of course, the next question, absolute location is comprised of, and the correct answer would be E, A, and D, latitude and longitude. Number 13, latitude is C, the arc angle distance north and south of the equator measured in degrees. Again, refer to several places in the content, including chapter 2, and lots of places. Longitude is the arc angle distance east and west of the prime meridian measured in degrees. The prime meridian is 0 degrees longitude, and that, of course, passes through the Greenwich Observatory in London. The Tropic of Cancer is in the northern hemisphere. It is a line of latitude located at 23.5 degrees north of the equator. The Tropic of Cancer marks the farthest point north that the sun's direct rays strike the Earth during the year. Cartography and navigation are most closely associated with the spatial tradition of geography. And again, the spatial tradition just says that geographers, at the end of the day, create maps. We see things spatially. The prime meridian is D, a line of longitude at 0 degrees. So number 17, the correct answer is D, a line of longitude at 0 degrees. Number 18 comes from the history and geography timeline. So Dr. Ivan van Sertimer and other noted human anthropologists and geographers provided evidence through extensive research that Africans sailed to the Americas and established civilizations approximately 2,300 years before Christopher Columbus's voyages. Refer to the timeline for that one. Which answer below is a scientifically valid example of the environmental determinism theory? If you remember from class, when we first visited the environmental determinism theory, we described and discussed a period of time in his history when geographers were using the environmental determinism theory as a means to support white supremacist ideology and practice. The environmental determinism theory basically says that the environment in which a human group evolves determines specific things about their character, their characteristics, their physical appearance, and so on and so forth. Not controversial at all. But when geographers historically were using environmental determinism to say that the environment in which whites or Europeans evolved made them superior to everybody else, that's when geography as a discipline got into trouble. However, we learned later on that with the correct answer, C, that the development of pastoral cultures, and so this whole pastoral culture, this way of life that is presumably male dominated, those cultures are created or developed in the dry climate regions of the world because these cultures often practice livestock agriculture primarily, and livestock management falls in the hands of men, and they represent wealth. And so therefore, in that kind of a society, men would be presumably dominant, given that juxtaposition. Pastoral, the word pastor is a term that means he who takes care of the flock of animals or whatever. And so pastor is an agricultural term that comes out of pastoral cultures and societies. So the correct answer to number 19 is C. Number 20 comes from the timeline. Geography's quantitative revolution took place approximately between 1950 and 1960. Essentially, the quantitative revolution saved the field of geography from its sordid past, dwelling in environmental determinism as a way to support white supremacist theory and practice. And so during the 1950s, younger, more progressive geographers started to take a more scientific approach to the field, started to use math, spatial analysis, and it turned the discipline around and made geographers and geography a lot more useful. Rather than just trying to figure out how white people are superior to everybody else. Geographers turned the corner during the 1950s and 1960s. 21, blank technology will be most effective in determining the absolute location of each student's home in class. That, of course, would be global positioning systems or GPS, and that's what GPS does. It finds absolute locations. Number 22, the aerial photograph of TSU's campus and environs is most likely produced using C, remote sensing technology. And so the main thing that we're looking at is this, the main clue is aerial photograph, okay, big clue. And so remote sensing is when we observe or take images of the earth from a distance, from outer space, from an airplane, from a balloon, or what have you. So C is the correct answer to number 22. Number 23, on the aerial photograph, the Tennessee State University track off of Dr. Walter A. Davis Boulevard is located in the C northwestern portion of the image. So here's Dr. Walter S. Davis Boulevard. You can clearly see the track there. And so if we assume that the top of the map is north, which is if there is no, well, actually there is a north arrow on this map. So we know that the this direction towards the top of the map is north. And so therefore, one simple navigation trick is if you're facing north, or if the top of your map is north, west is to your left, east is to your right, north, west. That's where the track is. So that would be number C. On the aerial photograph, Hadley Park is most likely located at C, 36.163830 degrees north, minus 86.822110 degrees west longitude. This question was just to see how closely you were paying attention to some of the work we did in class surrounding maps, and that 36 degrees north, negative 86 degrees west is a location that is somewhere in Nashville. And so if you were paying attention and were really familiarizing yourselves, or really this was an open book exam, you could have just gone to Google Maps and just tossed in each one of these latitude, longitude positions, and this one would have popped up right at Hadley Park. You could have done it that way, or you just could have been familiar with the position. Again, number 25, the correct answer is C. The representative fraction scale for the aerial photograph is most likely 1 to 24,000. So by process of elimination, you should have known it was not D or E. These are small scale representative fractions. 1 to 1 would mean that the map is the same size as real life. So we know it can't be that, right? 2 to 5, still, that would mean every 2 inches on the map, for instance, would be 5 inches in real space. That would be a very large map. So the only answer that makes sense is 1 to 24,000, or 1 inch equals 24,000 inches, or 1 inch equals 2,000 feet. And you could have surmised that by visual inspection of the map. And anyway, so the only answer that makes sense amongst those 5 is C. The correct answer to 25 is equivalent to the verbal scale. 1 inch equals 2,000 feet. I was a little lenient with this one. Normally, I would say if you got 25 wrong, then I would have automatically made you have 26B wrong. But I gave you cut y'all a little slack there. But the correct answer is 1 inch equals 2,000 feet, as I've already mentioned. This is a question to see how closely you were paying attention during lecture. So the correct answer is E, Domino's Pizzas. We learned that any business that delivers uses GIS technology. Any business that delivers anything. Pizzas, packages, what have you. The emergence and success of the multi-billion-dollar geolocation services industry, which includes multinational companies such as Uber, is most closely associated with B, the space age of the 1970s. That's when we first started launching satellites. We, meaning humans, first started launching. That wasn't when we first started launching satellites. This is when we first started launching commercial satellites that would eventually be used to communicate via cellular phones and mobile devices, and of course, companies such as Uber benefit from that. So B was the correct answer to number 28. Again, number 29 was taken from some of the careers in geography and GIS content. And you learned that Forcex, a Nashville company in 2004, earned well over $30 million per year in revenue, producing maps to the U.S. military. So that, of course, is cartographic services, D. Number 30, during lecture and also in the geography and GIS careers content, you learned that Sample Scene, a Black-owned geolocation services company founded by Mr. Lawrence Griffith, earns up to $5 million annually, and his app connects consumers to products through notifications. And so if you get notifications about the things that you buy, this is one of the major companies that does that, and it is Black owned and Black founded by Mr. Lawrence Griffith, who is based in Chicago, by the way. Okay, so the next question referred to this map. So it says the cartographer who drew the map on the next page practiced D, generalization, by not including each U.S. state on the map. And so as you can see, we have a map of nations, the individual Canadian provinces and various subdivisions of each country, or the states of Mexico or the states of the United States, are not on this map because it would probably be kind of cluttered. And so in order to make maps neater and easier to read, cartographers leave certain features off. In this case, the cartographer decided not to include those subregions, and so the map is easier to read and interpret. So that practice is called generalization. On the map on the next page, Madagascar. So first you had to find out where Madagascar is. It's this island off the southeastern coast of Africa. So Madagascar, is it located north of 0 degrees latitude? That would be the equator. No. Is it between the prime meridian and 90 degrees west longitude? So here's a prime meridian and 90 degrees. Nope, can't be B. Is it between 0 degrees and 90 degrees south latitude? Yes, it is. Here's 0 degrees latitude, 0 degrees south latitude is the South Pole. And there's Madagascar. So the correct answer, of course, would be C. These other two answers, of course, are not correct. Now here's one that you, again, could have used Google Maps to answer or what have you. A point on the Earth at 25 degrees north, minus 80 degrees west is located in Miami, Florida. So you could have said, okay, here's 23.5 degrees north. So, 25 degrees north is about right there. And then 80 degrees west is about right there. That points you directly to Miami, Florida. The rest of these answers obviously are not in Miami. The point on Earth described in question 33, again, I kind of cut you some slack on this one, is located closest, to the Tropic of Cancer. And so there's Miami, Florida. There's the Tropic of Cancer. Pretty straightforward there. A point on Earth at minus negative 42 degrees latitude, 122 degrees east longitude is in the eastern and southern hemispheres. So 122 degrees east is in the eastern hemisphere. That means that longitude is a positive number as opposed to being a negative number in the western hemisphere. If you think of this latitude longitude grid as an arithmetic grid, here's 0 or the x-axis, everything to the left of that is going to be a negative number if you think of it that way. So the correct answer for this one would be B. The map below is a B, small scale choropleth map. So remember, let's still go through process of elimination. The map covers the entire world. It cannot be a large scale map if it covers the entire world. So you can take out A, eliminate C. Now you know it has to be a small scale map. A small scale isotherm map is a map of temperature. Is that a map of temperature? No. Some small scale topographic map would be a map of elevations. Is there any elevation data on this map? No. A small scale choropleth map uses colors, color area symbols to present an idea or a message to the map reader. Is this a color area symbol map? Absolutely. Colors represent the political boundaries of each nation we see here. And so that means that the correct answer has to be B. On to 36, the Tropic of Cancer is located approximately blank miles north of the equator. So we know that, let's see if we break out our calculator here, I don't really need it. So we know that each mile we know that the Tropic of Cancer is at 23.5 degrees north times 69 degrees per whole, 69 miles per whole degree equals 1,621.5, which is approximately 1,600 miles north of the equator. So each whole degree is about 69 miles. The Tropic of Cancer is at 23.5 degrees north. 23.5 times 69 is approximately 1,600 miles. So the correct answer, number 37, is A. A blank is the equivalent verbal scale for a map drawn at the RF scale 1 to 63,360. That would be C, excuse me, that would be A, 1 inch equals 1 mile. 1 inch equals 1 mile. There are 63,360 inches per mile. So if an inch on a map equals 63,360 inches in real space, and 63,360 inches equals 1 mile. So that would convert to 1 inch equals 1 mile A. 39. Now this one was a little tricky. An equivalent verbal scale for a map drawn at the representative fraction of 1 to 6,000. So that means 1 inch equals 6,000 inches. And so if you take 6,000 inches, divide that by 12, you get 500 feet. Okay, so that one was kind of hard. So the correct answer would be C. If you got that one correct, congratulations. That one was meant to be challenging for you. The representative fractions in 38 and 39 are large scale, D, large scale representative fraction scales. And we've talked about the difference between large and small scale maps. So those 1 to 6,000, 1 to 63,360, they would qualify as being large scale maps in terms of representative fraction. A blank line symbol map would most effectively display the Earth's average annual precipitation totals. That will be B, isohyets. Isohyets are isolines that connect points of equal precipitation. Next, we have okay, 42, a blank line symbol map would most effectively display temperatures observed at various weather stations around the world. That would be an isotherm map. D, isotherms are isolines that connect points of equal temperature. 43, a blank symbol map, line symbol map would most effectively display elevations above mean sea level across North America. That, of course, would be C, topographic lines or isolines that connect points of equal elevation. 44, which one below would be most effectively displayed using a choropleth or color area symbol map? That would be a map of the political boundaries of the 48 conterminous United States. And so that a line of thunderstorms crossing the Great Plains is not really interstate highway system. That would be line symbols. The depth of North America's Great Lakes, those would be isobars. Those would be pleths. An isopleth map would be a map of water depth, and again, absolute locations of all of the light poles on TSU's campus would be point symbols, not a choropleth map. 45, which one below we most effectively display using a topographic map? Of course, the elevations. B, the elevations of Death Valley that are below sea level using a 5-foot contour interval. That essentially describes exactly what a topographic map is. So that would be B. Which one of the professions below would most likely involve the collection and analysis of U.S. Census data? That would be a demographer. U.S. Census, U.S. Bureau of the Census analyzes and collects population data. B, demographer. 47, in order to show the population of U.S. cities displayed, the next several questions get you into, are an assessment of your understanding of using geographic information system software. You had a chance to use that during the first part of the semester. In order to show the population of U.S. cities displayed on ArcGIS online map, you must change the display of the attribute table fields. And so display style. So you would change display style to population, and that would give you the map showing the point symbols at different sizes, essentially circles of different sizes showing the population of different cities. So there's none of these other ones are correct. There's no population base map. The imagery labels base map wouldn't give you quantitative data. The zoom tool would just be used to zoom in, and there's no map. There's no A. Just makes no sense if you're familiar with ArcGIS Online. 48 is a comma delimited text file. CSV file is the attribute data table for ArcGIS Online. So if you remember, before you could even get your data into that map, you had to save it as a CSV file. That was before you could even post it. So that CSV file, if you click on your map, you could get directly into the data in the file via the map. So a GIS map is actually a map of data. It's actually a visualization of data. So whatever's in that database determines what's on the map. And so what's most important about using GIS is that your database has to be correct, or else your map is going to be incorrect. So I just wanted to get that point across. And Using ArcGIS Online in order to determine the mountain or mountain range close to your city, you would most likely use the measure tool. And we demonstrated how to do that in class. Some of you demonstrated it yourselves. So the measure tool is what you would use. Using ArcGIS Online, the terrain base map, D, would be most effective in displaying mountain ranges. And we just demonstrated that each base map in ArcGIS has a different function. And for displaying mountain ranges, the terrain base map generalizes, takes away a lot of the other features such as roads and cities, and all you really see are the mountain ranges. And it's easy to pick out mountain ranges when all the other features have been moved aside. Okay, so that thought I'd just go over that the exam with you. If you have any questions, you should go through this recording, see which ones you missed. If you still have questions, please let me know. So we're going to move away from this and go and take a look at some of what was submitted to the Dropbox. So I'm going to briefly pause, share screen. Okay, so pull the quiz up. Okay, so here's the quiz, of course, and I'm just gonna, so these submissions I'm about to show you have not been graded. I'm just going to give them a critique so that when you get your quiz next week, we'll be ready. So that is what we're gonna do. So let's look at some of these. So let's go to question number 1 for this student. So it says here, question 1, the student answered D. D has an above average number of sunny days. I'm not going to say whether that is not correct. So D is incorrect. So that answer is completely wrong, all 3 parts. But the approach is correct. So she answered the question. She gave an explanation. Unfortunately, is not correct. And for your reference source, you should be much more specific than this. Lecture recording. Where in the lecture recording? What's the timestamp? At what point in the lecture recording did Dr. Padgett say this? If you have a timestamp, then you can actually provide ample evidence that maybe would support your answer. But if you just say lecture recording, which lecture recording? What date? Okay, you have to be a lot more specific than this, or else I'm going to mark that wrong. Okay, that's not a good reference source. What date? Which recording? What's the timestamp? Okay, maybe take in here you might have a direct quote. Dr. Padgett said, that way even if you got this wrong, if you had all this evidence supporting your answer, you might get 2 out of 3 points there. Even if this is wrong, even if somehow, even with all this evidence, you came with the wrong answer, at least you made an honest effort. Okay. Let's see. Let's go to question 2. Question 2, a person suffering from seasonal affective disorder would most likely be advised by his or her physician not to live in the region near the letter blank. And she chose B. B. Okay, now that's the correct answer. Okay, however, this is wrong. Okay, so the explanation is just wrong. It's just wrong. I don't know. Again, Bradshaw book. No, what page? What chapter of the Bradshaw textbook? Okay, you just can't say the textbook. I'm going to mark this wrong. That's not enough information. Okay, you have to have page, chapter. You have to be very specific with your reference source. Okay, so just next week, remember that. Okay, I'm going to go pause the recording again. Okay, let's do this again. So here we're looking at question 3. The student answered E. E, the letter B on the map is most closely associated with the, and she answered E, Great Basin. That is incorrect. Yeah, that is incorrect. She said Great Basin, E. No. And so letter B is right there. So the question is, what physiographic region is most closely associated with letter B? In the student's answer, she said that she came to the conclusion by looking at the regions map at the beginning of the class. The question is, which map was that? You know, so be more specific. It should be map or figure 12.1. If you put the figure number here, then I'll know exactly where you looked. In this case, I can kind of guess that she looked at the physiographic regions map. I don't know for sure, but because this is the first quiz, I'm going to cut a little bit of slack here and say, okay, 0 points for the answer, 1 point for the explanation. And I'm pretty sure that maybe this lecture, now she did a good job of saying which lecture it is. She's got the date of the lecture. A timestamp would nail it down. I could go back, scroll to that timestamp and say, oh, and chances are this is the lecture where I covered physiographic regions. That's early in the semester, March 3rd. In this case, I might give the student the benefit of the doubt, but I would be 100% certain if there was a timestamp here. And so in this case, this is a classic case of a student, wrong answer, looked in the right place, probably had the correct lecture recording. So still 2 out of 3 points, even though the answer is wrong. So make the effort to do the research and it'll pay off. Okay, so now I'm going to pause recording again. Okay, so now we're looking at another student's submission, in this case, Weaver. So let's see, we're going on this question 4. Okay, this I think is what I'm looking for here. So question 4 is the region on the map near letter R. There's letter R, is most closely associated with DC continental temperate climates. That is the correct answer. A. Okay, that's right. 1 point. Wow. So she says in the March 1st lecture, beginning around 2 minutes and 56 seconds, as a class, we begin looking at the different North American climate regions. Also uses for our ArcGIS data. Okay, and it is, she leaves no question, no question as to how she arrived at that answer. And she got it right, which means that, okay, that was a pretty good job. Then she goes on to say Bradshaw textbook figure 12.3, which is a map depicting the North American climate regions, is modified to the Köppen system. That's exactly what I want you all to do. If you're watching this recording and you look at the way that Weaver answered these questions, timestamp for the lecture. Left out the lecture date here, but but that's just a typo probably. Notice how she mentions the timestamp, exactly where Dr. Padgett said X, Y, and Z. Let's see. Okay, she's got the figure numbers. Yeah, so take a look at this. This is what I'm looking for. This is the level of detail that I'm looking for your answers. Take a good look at what Maya Weaver has done here. Page, figure numbers, page numbers, very specific. Let's go to question 7 here. Question 7 says the climate graph below is most likely for the region closest to the letter. And she answered D. Okay, so let's look at the climate graph. With the characteristics of the climate graph, big clue here, the climate graph has a very wide temperature range. And so she answered D. So D is N. N is approximately where Ottawa, Canada is located. So that is correct. Okay, so how did she arrive at that answer? She said on the March, at 18 minutes and 43 seconds of the March 1st lecture, Dr. Padgett showed and explains the importance of how to interpret a climate graph. Okay, well, I would like to have seen a little bit more. Like, okay, what about that? What about that? Well, the specific thing that should have been included in that answer was that the region of North America where that climate graph data was collected exhibits a wide temperature range. So what was it specifically that drew you to answer D? Now, clearly, I know this was going on in Weaver's head, but you got to put it in the answer. You saw the wide temperature range. You said, aha, look at this. 14 degrees Fahrenheit during the winter, really below 14 degrees Fahrenheit in winter for the low, 68 degrees Fahrenheit for the high in July. So you've got a 54 degree Fahrenheit temperature range. That's a relatively wide range, 54 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the big clue for those continental or D climates. That's what you're looking for. Wide temperature range, probably a D climate. Okay. So that's what she should have, or any of you, not just we, but any of you should say, I noticed that there's a 54 degree Fahrenheit temperature range, which is indicative of D climates. Boom. Put that in there. That makes it perfect. In this case, because it's the first quiz, I'll let it go at this. Okay. So I think that we have pretty much with this answer, I think we've pretty much provided what is expected on your next quiz that will be next week, that will cover the human geography of North America. I will try my best to have these quizzes graded by next Monday. I'll try my best. As you can see, I have to do a lot of reading in order to grade each one of these with care. And I want to take as much time as possible so that I'll respect the time that you took to take the quiz and actually read what you took time to write. So I will try my best by at least, hopefully Monday, but no later than Wednesday. But if you're watching this recording, you'll be prepared for the quiz next week. in terms of how you should answer these questions. But Weaver here has done a really good job of demonstrating that. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to back to the class. And the last part of the lecture for today is going to focus upon the last part of the human geography of North America. And so this last part of the human geography of North America focuses upon the fact that, as we can see when we go to the Population Reference Bureau World Population Data Sheet, you will note that, or you should have noted, or I did mention last time, that compared to the rest of the world's nations, the United States has a significantly higher, for the most part, urban population. So if we go here and we go deeper into the into the table, here you'll notice that we look at urban population. The United States and Canada have 82 and 81% urban population respectively. Whereas, let's see if we can look at that same figure. If we look at that same figure for other places on the planet, we have to kind of scroll through. So South America's urban population, the continent of South America has an 84% urban population. So that's interesting. That's even higher than us. But if you look at parts of Asia, so for Asia, the percent urban population is only 51%. And so in many places in Asia, very few people live in urban areas. Many people live in rural areas. If you look at here's South Asia, only 36% of the population of South Asia is in urban areas. If we look at Europe, we have a slightly more urbanized population in most of Europe. And if we look at Oceania, they're 68% urbanized, so on and so forth. So we meaning the United States and Canada, we are a population that is predominantly located in cities. And so one interesting fact that relates to both physical geography and urban geography are urban settlement patterns along the East Coast. And so here we have an image of what is called the East Coast fall line. And so the East Coast fall line is the boundary between the Piedmont region and the coastal plain. And so if you remember, the Piedmont region is a transition zone between the Appalachian Mountains and the coastal plain. And what happens is, historically, is when rivers flow off of the solid rock of the hills of the Piedmont region onto the coastal plain, they drop, there's a drop. And so it's called the fall line, because what we find when water flows over a drop off are waterfalls or falls. And what happens at that point in rivers and streams is the water increases in velocity. And so that increase in velocity provides greater energy. And that energy was used by human beings to power mills, sawmills, grain mills. And so mills were developed all along these settlements historically along the eastern seaboard. And around those mills grew cities such as Baltimore, Washington, Richmond, Virginia, Raleigh, North Carolina, and so on and so forth. So that physical feature, the fall line, had a direct impact upon the urban geography of the East Coast. And so that's a very interesting fact. And so here's the fall line, water flowing off of this solid rock, dropping down, eroding the coastal plain, increased velocity in rivers and streams here, and humans use that energy to produce mills. Why did cities develop around the mills? Remember, historically, people didn't have cars. People weren't commuting miles and miles from stores or places where they could get supplies. People lived around close to places where they got supplies or services. And so that's why cities developed around that fall line. If we go to the textbook, and I'm just going to briefly navigate to this. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to focus upon in terms of urban geography are cities and urban landscapes in North America, which is in chapter 12, beginning on page 557. And so the section is urban landscapes. And so if we look at figure 12.26, we have various urban landscapes. And urban landscapes are essentially models of how cities have developed or how cities develop. And so for North America, the concentric zone model is essentially the way most cities have developed in North America, primarily due to the automobile. The automobile has allowed for us to live far away from the central business district. So the central business district in cities, or zone 1, is where we find commercial activity, government activity. Sometimes it's called downtown. That's the primary land use is commercial and public, not a whole lot of residential. And so zone 1 is where most people across the region work. And so let's look at Nashville. So we have Nashville is the capital of Tennessee. So you have all those state employees, correct? It's obviously also, you have Nashville's government, those employees. And then there are a variety of public spaces, the convention center. There are commercial businesses that serve downtown, such as hotels and restaurants. So that mixture of public and commercial space is where a lot of people are employed. Then, of course, if you look at the Vanderbilt corridor around West End and what they call Midtown, Vanderbilt is the largest private employer in Nashville. So there are a lot of people commuting in and around the Vanderbilt, and then there are peripheral businesses that serve that population. So it's all within what we would call the central business district. But people don't live there. And as a matter of fact, a lot of those positions are relatively high paying. The people that have those high paying jobs live out here in what's called the higher class or higher income residential suburbs: Brentwood, Cool Springs, Franklin, Mount Juliet, right? And they drive in to work at these places in the central business district. The only way that they're able to do that is because our urban infrastructure is developed to provide for, or to primarily support automobile transportation, not even really public transit. Right? I mean, I don't think I would want to try to ride a bus back and forth to work from Franklin, Tennessee, or Murfreesboro. Some people probably do it. Maybe not Franklin, maybe Murfreesboro, but definitely not Franklin. But the automobile has shaped this landscape. Notice at zone 3 is where we have what's called, I don't like the term class, let's say lower income residential. So zones 3, 4, 5, and 6 are where we find people living, residential land use. Okay, now zone 3 is where we would find, say, public housing. If you look at Nashville, close to downtown, but not far out, Cheatham Place, Napier Homes, Edgehill Homes, Casey Homes, they're all close to downtown, but certainly not far away from downtown. And so the low income residential neighborhoods are located in close proximity to this light manufacturing zone too. Because traditionally and historically, people didn't want to live next to factories after a while. At first they did, but then once the automobile allowed people to commute, wealthier people moved out to the suburbs. Less wealthy people stayed close to downtown. Now we know that that is changing, of course, through something that is called gentrification. And so we know that in urban areas that more and more people are moving from the suburbs to downtown. Okay, so why is that happening? Well, it's happening for a variety of reasons. The reason that more and more people from higher incomes are moving to downtown is for a variety of reasons. One, the older population, the baby boomers who live in those suburbs, their children have left home, hopefully. They're in these big houses, they're ready to retire. They don't need to be climbing up on the ladder, cleaning out gutters. They want to downsize. A lot of them will downsize to a condominium downtown where they can live a healthier, more active lifestyle, walk to the store, walk to entertainment. They don't have to deal with the maintenance of a big house. And so they move downtown. That's the baby boomer generation. Now, the millennials generation, they're putting off family lifestyle. They're single. They don't have money. Largely, the baby boomers still hold 70% of the nation's wealth. So a lot of the millennials just simply cannot afford to buy a home or a car. So they like to live in close proximity to work and entertainment so they can walk everywhere. So a lot of millennials who might not necessarily be low income, even though I'm saying they don't have a whole lot of money, but they're certainly not living in public housing. But they prefer to live in these downtown urban spaces that are a lot more vibrant. And so if you're in Nashville, let's say a place like the Gulch area of town that has all those apartments and multi-family or multi-residential housing in the Gulch, and you have a lot of young people who might be starting out or at mid-career levels, and they're They want that vibrant lifestyle. And so the Gulch area of Nashville is where you would find that. Uh, the next reason for people downside or moving into inner cities via gentrification is because of the higher cost of fuel. It just costs too much to keep driving back and forth to work. The money that is spent on gasoline could in turn be spent on property or rent or something else that's has a longer life and is more sustainable. I can use myself as an example. I used to live outside of Nashville. I used to live in a place called Madison, which is like 25 miles away from TSU. I would drive back and forth, 50-mile round trip every day. I was putting $250 a month in my gas tank. I started to think about that. I said, wait a minute, on the low end, that's $2,500 a year. After 10 years, after 5 years, that's 10. Well, after 4 years, that's $10,000. After 8 years, that's $20,000. I could be spending on something else, like anything else. Could buy a house, invest, have money that appreciates instead of going into the gas tank. So I moved back close to downtown. And my monthly expense on gasoline went down to $50 a month. So the other $8,000 a year start for the next 10 years went into I kept it. That's $80,000 that I did not spend on gasoline over those next 10 years that I lived downtown. So a lot of people made that decision. So for a variety of reasons, people are moving downtown and are gentrifying these communities. But of course, as you can see, beginning on page 55, 54, we start to see this increasing gap between the wealthy and the poor, and cities becoming more segregated, specifically in part because of gentrification. And a lot of issues have developed as a result of it, such as displacement. So oftentimes when neighborhoods gentrify, lower income people are displaced because they cannot no longer afford to live there. The property taxes go up. They can't pay their property taxes. They have to move. And then sometimes if they're renting, the landlord or the person that owns the property will sell the property right from under them. I mean, if you're renting, you have no rights to that property beyond your lease. So if whoever owns your property sells the whole building or sells the whole complex and decides they're going to change it to condos or just tear the whole thing down, you got to go at the end of your lease. And so that's why gentrification is a very controversial topic, So gentrification is the movement of higher income families and individuals, presumably from regions, zones 4, 5, and 6, perhaps to zone 3, or in some cases, even zone 2. And so gentrification is a word that will come up again later on. Okay, so tomorrow starts your spring break, your 2-day spring break this year. So just remember, you do have an article review due. That's it. And please watch these lecture recordings so that you will get a jump on studying for the next quiz. I have to go to class, so I will stop share. If you have any questions, let me know. And I will see you all next Monday. Have a safe spring break of wherever you're going to go for the next 2 days. And see you next week.
All right, you too.